They say silence in the countryside is peaceful. But what if that silence is hiding something that was never meant to be found? Tonight, I'll tell you a story about a man who stayed in an old rural house, a place where he thought he was alone. But what returned from that house may not have been him at all. The engine's final cough was the first breath of silence I'd drawn in a week. I stepped out of the car, shoulder aching from luggage and silence. The town of Hollow Pines lay quietly before me, a scattering of weathered houses and farmland shadowed by pine trees. It was dusk, and long purple clouds stretched over fields of barley and corn. A stiff breeze carried the tang of damp soil and wood smoke, and my boot ground on a tired, cracked road leading nowhere. I couldn't remember why I'd come here, only that I had to. Sometimes when memory wants to hide, it has to get creative. The house I'd rented stood alone on the edge of a clearing. It was small, older than I remembered, with paint chalked ashen white and shingles loose on the roof. The windows were dark, and the silence so complete it felt like something was holding its breath. I lifted my suitcase and strode up the path, shoes cracking on gravel. My fingers hung on the doorknob for a long moment. Inside, the air smelled of dust and cedar. I flicked the light switch, but only a feeble bulb at the far end of the room flickered on. Shadows stretched into corners. Everything was old wood and shadow, the kind of place you forget people can live. There was a blanket on the couch, as if someone had just stepped away. On the kitchen table, an untouched mug of cold tea. For a moment, I thought perhaps I'd arrived too early, or maybe too late. But then the question hit. Where was the person who left it? A shiver edged down my spine. I turned quickly. The kitchen felt suddenly exposed, and I backed out of the room. The front door swayed gently on its frame, though I had pulled it closed. For just a second, I thought I heard a soft click of a lock, or maybe just the evening breeze. I tried not to breathe too loud and moved deeper into the house. The wood floor was smooth under my steps, and each creak sounded like a loud footstep in the emptiness. I set my suitcase down in the bedroom. The bed was made, the sheets crisp and cool, waiting for someone. The curtains were drawn. The forest outside was a black wall against orange twilight. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulling off my boots and feeling the quiet press closer. Far in the distance, a single crow cried out, lonely and cold. The exhaustion of the drive finally caught up to me in the empty house. I lay back on the bed. The old mattress dips and creaks. The darkness on the ceiling flared and retreated from my eyes as sleep threatened. But just as my heartbeat began to slow, a tiny noise made me jerk upright. Someone or something was whistling, faintly. In the silence of the night, it was nearly lost, a low, reverberating tune I couldn't place. It sounded like a soft lullaby played through a tin can. My heart leapt into my throat. I stayed absolutely still. The whistling stopped the moment I blinked. For a long time I lay awake, listening to the house. The old place groaned as if sighing, and the wind hurried through cracks in the wood. My mouth was suddenly dry. My hands shook when I gripped my phone. I had no signal. I put it on the bedside table, but I couldn't stand the silence. The next morning, the sun was a thin sliver on the horizon by the time I woke. The oil lamp on the bedside table still had a hint of warmth, as if someone had lit it and left. I wasn't sure I wanted to know who. I walked outside. The chill morning air burned my lungs with freshness. The trees swayed lazily as if stretching. At the fence line, dust hung above a path I hadn't noticed the night before. Footprints. A child's footprints, small and bare, pressed in the morning dew of the bare earth. I stared at them, heart pounding. They led away from the house toward the fields. But when I moved forward, they faded, as though trampling something tender. Down the road, I found the store. It was a tiny wooden shack at the crossroads. dust settling on windows that displayed nothing but faded deer antlers and burned-out candles. I opened the door. The bell above tinkled. An old woman was inside, hunched at the counter with a teacup, staring into steaming tea leaves. She looked up, her eyes a pale blue lantern glow. "Come to settle in, have you?" She croaked. Her voice was like a brittle branch breaking underfoot. "We've been waiting." I bristled. "You were waiting? For me?" "I just got here this morning." She gave a dry chuckle that scraped the edges of my claw. "Strange stranger. The house told me you'd be coming." Goosebumps rose on my arms. She held my gaze. "The house? What house? My place?" The woman's smile was slow and knowing, like sunlight breaking through the trees. "Aye, young one. That house of yours. The one at the edge. Been empty a long time. But the wood knew you. Told me you'd be here." A knot formed in my throat. I mumbled something about coffee and left quickly. The old store bell tinkled farewell. Outside, the dusk wood came alive with owls' calls and wind. I felt as if I were being watched. The next few days blended into uneasy routine. Every morning, I woke to find tiny things had moved. A book I had placed on the knitstand was on the floor. A window cracked open. I blamed sleepwalking at first, but each time I woke fully, everything was properly in place, except those few small changes. I heard whispers at night, soft conversations that ceased when I stood up. Once, I was sure I saw a dark silhouette of a girl standing at the end of my bed, just out of reach of the lamp's glow. But when I sat up and flicked on the light, the room was empty. Just a child's drawing on the wall, pinned crooked. Days into the silence, the isolation finally began to seep into my bones. I started talking out loud to myself, testing words that had no listener. I'd scream into pillows and listen for an echo. The house grew colder with every sunset, the darkness heavier. My dreams turned jagged and sharp. I dreamt I wandered through these fields at midnight. I followed a pale lantern through the woods. In the dream, the lantern always went out just as I reached it. I kept seeing a figure in white, far away, turning to look at me with eyes full of sorrow. I'd jolt awake, heart slamming. The room would be dark, though a telltale amber stain lingered on the wall where the lamp had burned before. In the light of day, I made excuses to stay busy. I fixed the cracks in the porch, swept the floorboards, cut grass that grew too tall. Each task grounded me, connected me to daylight reality. But at night, I was quickly unmoored again. One morning, I realized I couldn't remember the exact reason I'd come to Hollow Pines. My mind kept clouding over it. I remembered only a voice, faint and pleading. I must have been running. Always running, but from what? I didn't know. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My reflection was hollow-eyed, pale as the wall behind me. A bruise on my wrist I didn't recall appeared, a pale yellow bruise or burn. A tremor in my fingertips made the reflection ripple. That evening, I tried to make sense of it all. I took out a notebook and drew a map of the town, of the fields. I listed the oddities, the mug on the table, small footprints, the old woman's words. Beneath that list, I scribbled another note. What do I remember? What do I hide? The page stared back at me, the words curling like smoke. As midnight approached, my despair climbed. I paced the wooden floors, reckless. The house no longer felt like shelter. Its walls pressed inward. I flicked on the lights, but the shadowy corners remained deep. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. I froze. Whoever or whatever was walking above me, ... I'd been alone. The floorboard above the kitchen groaned again. I hurried out into the living room. The lamp sputtered as I entered. My breathing rasped in my throat as I reached for the glass oil lamp. It was there, just as I had left it. But something was off. On the other side of the table sat a cup, not the mug I'd used. A child's cup, chipped and small. My heart leapt. That cup, I had seen it before, in a dream. At the end of a field, by a wildflower, I had picked up the same chipped cup and spilled tea all over the grass. Had I imagined that? A breath behind me made me spin around. The house was behind me in darkness. Cold hands clamped on my shoulders. I jerked forward into empty air. The lamp's flame flared and died. I was alone. A pounding whisper of wind rattled through the cracked window. Silence fell heavy, as if the house were laughing. I ran outside into the night. The air felt heavy. Every breath I took was thick with smoke. My lungs burned. I looked up at the sky, no moon, just a blanket of clouds. The farm fields lay still as a grave. And then I saw footprints leading away from the house into the woods. 2 sets, one small, one mine. I fell to my knees. My head ached with all I had forgotten, with all I could not recall. The air shifted, and I realized I wasn't alone. Just behind me, a figure stood in the doorway of the house. The door was cracked open on its own. He stepped forward into the black, merging like smoke. Under the brim of his hat, I could not make out his face. But he smiled, and it was my smile. My own eyes stared back at me, cold and unblinking. "You found me?" I whispered. The voice was mine, but distant, detached. "I have been waiting." I could not scream. I saw too clearly now. The truth rushed in like a flood. Every teacup moved, every lullaby in the dark, every footprint I had made them. All of them. I had dreamt of that figure in white. I was that figure in white. I'd been here before, and I never left. The reality fractured. I tried to run, but my legs sank into the earth. The figure advanced. My face stared out at me from empty darkness. I woke at dawn on the cold porch, the empty cup in my hand. The old house lay silent, its secrets held just out of reach. The fields glowed with morning mist. I stood up. My bruised arms ached in the cool light. Was it finally morning, or had I never slept? I walked away from the house, leaving the door open behind me. The wind closed it with a soft thud, and through the silence, I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of whistling, and I knew it was me. The nightmare was still starting. The house would let me in. I was always waiting. So, if you ever pass through a quiet rural town and see an old house with its door slightly open, don't go inside. Because maybe it's not waiting for someone new. Maybe it's waiting for you. If this story sent chills down your spine, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more terrifying tales you should never watch alone. Because the next story might just be about you.